Hey everyone, welcome to the show today. We are going to be talking about building the mental edge, resilience for athletes and parents. So I am very excited about this topic. I have Dr. Kate Lund with us today. She is a psychologist, performance coach, speaker, author. We're going to be talking about her new book that has come out, Step Away: The Keys to Resilient Parenting. All you parents, get ready to chime in and listen to this. But Dr. Lund, thank you so much for coming on the show. I would love to just have you tell us a little more about what you do, your experience, and then I know we're going to talk a little bit about your book, but give us a little plug.
Sure, sounds good. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here. So that's the first thing. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working in this space for 20 plus years. I started very specifically in medical psychology,
Ah,
working with kids, families where there was a significant medical illness or physical challenge for the child.
very
And
interesting.
so that's still a piece of what I do, but I've really
Mm.
evolved over time, largely because we moved like 17 times with my husband's job. So the great thing is that as a psychologist, you can be
Mhm.
portable and flexible like that. So
Yeah.
I've evolved and expanded, and at this point, I'm working mostly with adults, parents primarily, because they all happen to be parents, helping them to build resilience and thrive within their own unique context, whatever that looks like for them. I also work specifically with a subset of sports parents and adolescent athletes who are working to overcome performance blocks and just optimize their
Yeah.
play and their ability, their mindset in their sport, whatever that is. And otherwise, I have 18-year-old twin boys who are both athletes. They're rowers.
You're not
And
busy at all.
not at all. No, no. And so it's been kind of cool to be on the sidelines of, regattas for the past 5, 6 years
Yeah.
as a parent who, you know, is supporting the boat wherever it comes in. And other than that, I'm a dog lover. I do a lot of volunteer work out at Seattle Children's Hospital with my dog Wally, who is part of the animal assisted therapy team over there. So
Love that.
that's
Um,
that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. Yeah, I have so many friends, dietitian friends that have kids, and it's funny. I've had dietitian friends that weren't necessarily sports dietitians, but now all their kids are athletes, and they're like, "Can you help me? Do you have a course? Like, what do you have here?" Because they're wanting to chime in, and it's funny how it builds that interest. So I love that. Love that you've worked with both parents and adolescent teen athlete, obviously, who we're kind of talking to today. So, talk to me a little bit about in both spaces, and I know we're going to dial in a little bit more on parents about true mental resilience. Like for a parent who sometimes I think might even be more into the sport than the athlete is, and from an athlete, from both perspective, how do you really start to build true mental resilience?
Yeah, and so the key there is for both parents and athletes having a way to modulate your stress response
Hmm.
so that you're showing up each day at this in this level space so that you're not starting the day up here so that when a stressor or challenge hits, boom, you escalate to the point of shutdown.
Yeah.
And on the sidelines, that could mean escalating to a point of responding or reacting to what's going on the field in a way that you don't want to. So, really important for parents, athletes to have a way to manage that stress response so that they can internalize that becomes part of their baseline over time and with practice.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before this started about, high school, middle school sports. This has gone to a whole new level in regards to the competitiveness, to all the different components of what's kind of expected, I think, to succeed as a middle school, high school athlete, what's expected to be able to go to the next level. And to your point, that builds a lot of stress for both athletes and for parents. So I know you've said kind of like in your book that both burnout and perfectionism are really the things, or perfectionism are the kind of two barriers to success. obviously building resilience plays in to that, both the perfectionism area and then also the burnout area. But talk to me a little bit about like why you see these two things being so prominent in youth sports, what parents and coaches can do to help, because I think it all links together, resilience, and then because that's really what's key amidst burnout, and then kind of that perfectionist mentality. So talk to those parents and coaches about like what they can actually do, as you were mentioning, to build that resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And burnout, perfectionism, those are real, right? And those
Yeah.
are very, very much at the forefront in youth sports and
Hmm.
otherwise, everywhere really. And
Hmm.
so we want to really, in terms of perfectionism, help kids to understand that mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah.
They're not always going to win. They're not always going to be at their best, and that's okay. So we really do have to communicate that message and help our young athletes to internalize that reality. We also have to help them understand themselves within their own unique context. What does success, what does their best look like for
Yeah.
them? And we have to help them to internalize and accept that. Doesn't mean they can't train harder or work to get better or develop new skills, et cetera, et cetera. But at a certain point, we have to help kids, young athletes, understand that not everybody is going to be playing at the same level. They're not going to
Right.
have that natural whatever it is that allows them to, I'm going to use crew as an example, pull a 603 on the erg. And then there's the kid who trains and trains and trains, and just for whatever reason, and it might be mindset, it might be physical aptitude,
Yeah.
can't get below a 632.
Yeah.
It just is. And it doesn't mean that kid at 632 can't be training and working, but we don't want them to do that to the point of exhaustion, which is going
Yeah.
to lead to burnout, both mentally and physically. So we've got to help our kids strike a balance.
How do you do that in advance? So I have a little niece and a nephew. They're 10 and 7 now, so they're growing. And my parents live very near to them. And my dad is a very strong encourager. He always has been of my sister and I, of the kids. And so obviously they've grown up being highly encouraged and they both think they're amazing at all things. But out of my curiosity, kind of in your world, is there a way to like almost not prevent, but help reduce the risk of burnout and perfectionism? Like, what are you doing in advance? Like, especially for people that might have younger athletes that are going to be moving into that adolescent space. Are there things that parents and coaches can start to foster now that kind of set them up to maybe better manage and better endure those things that are coming their way?
Definitely, and one of the primary things we can do is make sure that they have, particularly for the younger athletes, time and space to do other things
Yeah.
that they love. That might even be playing another sport in a different season.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
might mean, not training year round in
Yeah.
the sport of choice, but it might just mean making sure that, on the weekends they have social connection with a friend or they're able to go to a movie with a family, something that is not related to
Yeah.
training or the sport specifically.
Yeah, I love that. I've talked to so many, just kind of playing in this space of like sports medicine professionals, sports doctors, all the different things that are like, you need to let kids play multiple sports and do other things. That way they're developing other skills. And even in sports, kind of minimizing sport specificity so early on so that they don't get burnt out. Because lots of these kids, I mean, you can start playing baseball when you're like 3. I mean, by the time you get to 13, you already have a decade in it. That's a long time for a
Right. And you're
kid.
on
So I
travel
love that.
teams and practices at 6 in the morning and 6 at night. And yeah,
Hmm.
it's a lot, right?
Yeah, 100%. My sister played volleyball growing up, and I just saw her last weekend, and we were talking about like when she played volleyball, like you couldn't even play club volleyball until you were 12. Like that was like a thing. I mean, you couldn't even do it. And now kids start so much earlier. So I think from a parenting perspective, coaches as well, just as you were saying, like making space for all the other things I think is huge just to make a more well-rounded child, well-rounded athlete, et cetera. So as we're talking about for parents, so okay, so let's talk a little bit about your book that's called Step Away: The Keys to Resilient Parenting. So I have not read the book, but I'm going to say check plus all parents that have athletes need to read this book. So talk to me a little bit, about what stepping away is, because obviously in sports, we encourage parents to be present. We encourage them to be there, just like you were saying. They need to play a role in helping maybe reduce the risk of burnout and perfectionism. But what is stepping away? What does that practically look like? And every parent's like, step away. What does that mean? So, talk to us a little bit about that in the context that you have that in.
Absolutely. That's such a great question. And the title is intentional, right? Because
Right.
step away. So what we're talking about there is we're talking about creating space for ourselves as parents to care for ourselves, manage our stress response in a way that optimizes what it looks like for us
Yeah.
to be at our best, to optimize our well-being in a way such that we can step forward and step into parenting in an optimized way. So it's that building, bolstering, fostering our own well being so that we can parent more robustly, parent more successfully based on what our child needs.
Okay, so I have my thoughts on in my head of what that means, but I'm going to ask you the same question that I just asked you about for kids. So with kids, we said, how do we help reduce the risk of burnout, all the things, and what you were saying, getting them involved in other things. In this situation, you're talking about, the well-roundedness of the parent. So what are some really practical things in your book that you give people? Like, what can they do to? Because a lot of parents are highly obsessed for good reason with everything that their child does. And to your point, like that's their whole world. So, what are some of the practical strategies where you can still manage that life of busy sports, all the things, and be present, but then also have some other time for yourself?
100%. And I agree with that wholeheartedly because I'm
Hmm.
actually in that space as well, right? Things
Yep.
happen and you're like laser focused and you want to
Yeah.
help and all these things. So that is real. That is very,
Yeah.
very real. And so
Hmm.
first and foremost, and I mentioned this up front, it's this idea of helping parents to find a way, and I do have a specific technique that I teach all parents to do this, but to manage their stress response so that they're showing up level
Yeah.
and their stress response is not escalated such that they're going to then shut down. And when our stress response is consistently escalated, we can't be at our best. We
Right.
don't feel very well. It's not good in any way. So I teach parents and I teach kids this too, and parents can also share this technique with their kids very, very effectively. It's a technique called the relaxation response,
Okay.
developed by a physician in Boston in the 1970s, before this type of thing was a thing, and has become the cornerstone of the mind body medicine program at Mass General Hospital. Very well researched, very robust, but very, very simple. And so, what we do is we come up with a word or a phrase that we find soothing in some way, and we breathe. And I have folks practice it for 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at the end of the day. And over time, with consistency of practice, that feeling of what it is to be modulated begins to become integrated, becomes more and more of our baseline. Cool thing is we can take this around with us in our back pocket,
Yeah.
use it when we're in an escalated situation, just for a minute or two. Think of that word, breathe, because the idea is like specifically when we're on the sidelines at a game and we're getting riled up because something's happened, the coach has made a call, or
Yeah.
our child made a mistake, or the goalkeeper let a goal through, or whatever it is, and we're feeling stressed and upset either within ourselves, for our child, what have you. We want to create space so that we can respond to that situation as opposed to react.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you another question of that. So, with that, the word
Yeah,
specifically,
yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
it more like a word like Caribbean and I can take myself there? Or is it more like peace, solitude? Like, you know what I mean? Because I think that some parents are like, how do I find a word to breathe on? Is it like, am I transporting myself to the beach, or am I just trying to focus on like a character trait or something like that? I'm sure it's different for different people, but those are two very different things. So, how do you advise people to kind of figure out what that word or what the thing maybe to focus on is?
100%. Great question. And it is different for all of us, right? We're not
Hmm.
all going to take the same angle or have the same word, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I encourage folks to think of something simple that
Hmm.
they find soothing in some way. And it might be beach, it might be
Okay.
Caribbean. And in that space, they're sort of transporting themselves there, but it's more like a placeholder that's not going to be distracting or get you riled up in any way. It's just going to
Got
help
it.
you stay level. So the reality is it's going to look different for all of us.
Okay. No, that makes sense. But I was just curious, because you kind of think like people go to your happy place, or go to your whatever, which could be a lot of things for people. And or is it like a word or something? So no, that's very helpful. Okay, so as we're talking about this, like for parents and modulating their stress responses, and then of course we're kind of telling parents, sometimes they're pushing their kids. How do they know like when to push? When to pull back, because for a lot of my dear sports parents out there, and this, many of this could be you, they hear pull back and they probably have like an automatic gag reflex to what you're saying, like, how can I pull back? My kid needs this, my kid needs that, etc. So how do parents start to recognize that potentially they might be a little more over involved, or how could they shift to potentially being maybe a little more like as a resilient supporter versus like dominating? I don't want to use the word, but whatever that is, like, how does a parent balance that? Because I mean, it's their kids. Like, I totally get it. But I think you say pull back, and a parent like wants to be like, how would I do that? So, how do you find that balance between like being there, being supportive, but also not like helicoptering every single move in that sports and athletic space?
Yeah, it's a great question and really important, right? And it's true. We want to be present. We want to be
Hmm.
very present for our kids in terms of what they need and to
Yeah.
help them be their best within whatever they're doing. But your question about how to balance how
Yeah.
much is too much and when to pull back, it's dependent on your child's disposition, your
Hmm.
understanding of what they need to be at their best, and your ability to notice when perhaps you're overstepping, you're pushing too hard.
Yeah.
They might start to shut down, rebel in a way. Their demeanor, their attitude towards the sport might change. So being really perceptive to those types of changes, but at the forefront, it's really knowing your child, because we
Yeah.
always want to be encouraging them. We always
Right.
want to be encouraging them to do their best, practice in certain ways to build new skills if that's necessary.
Hmm.
But there's a line where that level of encouragement can go
Yeah.
too far and can
Hmm.
cause our kids to shut down. And that line is different for all kids.
Yeah,
And
for
so we've
sure.
got to really be perceptive to who our child is and what they need to be at their best.
And I hear so many parents that, might have multiple athlete children that need something different at all levels. Like, like to your point, like them being different personalities, probably much driven different ways. I'm sure that can be a challenge for parents to try to meet each of their kids. Cause I have friends that like I mean, I have one, she got 5 kids. They're all athletes, like age 6 to 13. They're all athletes. So I'm sure that can be a lot for trying to figure that out as well.
That is huge, right? And I mean, I
Hmm.
have twin boys
Yeah,
and
I bet they're different.
totally different,
Crazy.
totally different kids,
Hmm.
different academically,
Yeah.
different in sports. They happen to do the same sport, but
Yeah.
they need different things within the sport to thrive.
Yeah.
And kind of my husband and I knowing that and knowing how to approach that with each of them is has been a very important thing. And it's not always easy. It's not always
Yeah.
clear. So that's another thing, knowing that
Yeah.
as parents, we're not always going to be perfect. We're not always
Hmm.
going to nail it the first time out of the gate when we're trying to help, when we're trying to do something positive. So there's
Hmm.
flexibility. We can shift gears if we need to.
Yeah, I love that. I'm not a parent, but I think it would be difficult to be one, especially when you're trying to balance like the needs of all the things and you want to be so involved. Yeah, you have to know when to pull back. So, you mentioned at the beginning that you've worked with so many different parents and so many different athletes. And I know you yourself have a podcast as well, the Optimized Mind, where you've talked to elite athletes, you've talked to, I believe, like Navy SEALs, high achievers. Maybe that's not even specifically in the sports space. But when you talk to those people, how can some of those skills that really help those individuals be great, let's say, how does that kind of like transcend to the young athlete and to the parent? Like, how are some of those things, like, obviously as an elite athlete, you're gonna have setbacks, you're gonna have things like, how do parents and athletes start to deal with being great but then also having setbacks in that space?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And, it comes down to this ability to manage our stress response,
Hmm.
know who we are, and know what we need to be at our best,
Yeah.
not be afraid to fail, to be able to get back up again when we do fail or not succeed the first time out of the
Hmm.
gate, and figure out another angle. So problem
Yep.
solve around the challenge. And that's what so many of the folks that I talk to on the optimized mind have been able to do
Yeah.
over time in terms of all aspects of their life and experience.
Well, it takes so much to be able to overcome difficulties. And, you see young athletes, they get hurt or they get benched or they get whatever. And I know it can be like devastating for the athlete, of course, also devastating for the parent. And obviously, you've worked with it at the highest level. So when those types of scenarios come up, whether it's injury, gosh, I was watching an NFL game this week and you saw someone get hurt again, like he's been hurt multiple times this year. And just having worked in
Oh,
sports, I mean, your heart just breaks for like everyone watching the whole situation, the whole team, you know what I mean? Just all the things. And so, like, when there's injury, when there's like, oh, I didn't make a team, when there is loss or whatever, it could even just be losing a game, small in the big picture. Like, how do you help young athletes as well as parents in that space? Kind of what are some of those strategies for mental recovery? In my world, we talk a lot about nutrition recovery and physical recovery and fluid and carbs and protein, but it is a whole nother level to be able to mentally recover and be resilient. I think that word just keeps trending throughout what we're talking about, after something either negative has happened or in one of these challenging situations.
100%. Yeah. And so, first and foremost, it's to sort of understand what's happened and what the
Mhm.
steps are going to need to be to move
Yeah.
forward. And then to have support in moving through those steps, right?
Yeah.
And then focusing at the same time on the possibility on the other side of that
Yeah.
challenge, right?
I like that.
Not letting the child, the athlete, any of us really shut down as a result of the
Hmm.
challenge, but rather helping them along the way to focus on what's possible on the other side
Yeah.
of that challenge. And that's a process.
Yeah.
And also helping them to find other ways to build their skills
Yeah.
and what they need to be successful in the given domain, the sport, what have you. Maybe it's watching tape. Maybe it's, you know, um, reading or talking to other athletes about what helps to make them successful. It's all of
Yeah.
those things that are really, really key.
Yeah, it's just so hard. How about for parents? Like, how should they be encouraging that athlete? Because obviously, a lot of times they're devastated too. My dad, I mean, he's just like the ultimate parent. I mean, both of my parents are, but he just doesn't get anything that goes wrong. He's like, "Well, it's spilled milk. What are we gonna learn? Can't go back and change it." Like that's my whole life. That's what I've heard. It's spilled milk. And so, how do you encourage a parent that could also be feeling that loss of their kid not being able to play or something happening? Like, how do you encourage them, or what are maybe some strategies that you use for them to bounce back and then be back to being that supporter that they need to be for their kids?
It is so hard. Not a
Can't
lot of
imagine.
easy answers there.
Hmm.
Not a lot of easy answers because when our child gets hurt,
Yeah.
when they can't do the thing that they love, we're going to feel that.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
devastating. And I've been there, trust me, I've been there. And it's not an easy place to bounce back from,
Hmm.
but it's engaging in that supportive process with our child, helping to get them connected with the support that they need, and recognizing that it's going to take time, it's going to take focus for them to get back to where they were. And that might even look different. It
Yeah.
might be a new normal that's
Hmm.
created on the other side. Um, but there's no one size fits all, but it's also focusing for us as parents on really doubling down on
Yeah.
optimizing our own sense of well-being.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of sticking with the parent space. Like when, like, say in one of these situations, a kid suffers a major injury, not like a sprained ankle, they're going to be out for 2 weeks. They tore an ACL or they didn't make a team or something like that. Being a clinical psychologist, at what point does a parent start to realize their kid is not bouncing back and the parent isn't maybe the best person to be intervening? Like, it's funny being a sports dietitian. There's so many times that I've met with moms and daughters, moms and sons, and the mom's like, I've said that 100 times. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm just not their mom. I'm just not their mom. So they listen to what I say. And so in this space, when this is going on, when does a parent go, ooh, maybe we need to work with a sports psychologist or a psychologist? Like, when should they be tapping into that? Because I'm sure for some parents, that might be hard for them to like admit that, hey, my kid's not bouncing back as quick from this as they should. They're struggling. I mean, I don't know if there's an exact answer, but some tips maybe for parents to like say, hey, we might need to get a third party, someone like yourself involved to help kind of modulate and or help this environment from a third party perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And it's a really important one because, yeah, sometimes parents want to think, nope, I got this. I can
Yeah.
handle it. It's
Yep.
my kid.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And it is true. Our kids, particularly as they hit adolescence and,
Mm-hmm.
upper adolescence, they're going to listen to someone like a sports nutritionist or
Yep.
a sports psychologist much more readily than they're going to listen to us as parents.
Yep.
So it's, noticing those changes, subtle or more obvious, where the child seems to be losing hope
Yeah.
in the process of the recovery, kind of pulling back or kind of coming up with an attitude of, well, it doesn't matter anyway. It's
Yeah.
those kinds of moments like, hey, bud, let's, maybe, I've got this person, X, Y, and Z. Perhaps it'd be helpful if you were to talk to them, maybe some strategies or angles that, I'm not able to come up with. Maybe that would be helpful. What do you think? Because you
Yeah.
don't want to ever force that
Right.
direction,
Right.
but
Totally.
you want to kind of engage in the process of making it happen. But those are some of the thoughts that I would have, and those are some of the things that I've experienced with my own clients.
Yeah, I love that because I think so many times parents probably feel a little helpless in some of those situations. Like you can encourage, but you're also like what we've said, as a parent, you're very emotionally involved. And sometimes it's probably difficult to remove yourself from those, emotionally from those scenarios, which it makes, I mean, not, it makes total sense to me, but being able to identify like, oh, this isn't bouncing back, or this child is not being able to bounce as quickly as we thought. Like even working with athletes from my side that have had trouble on the nutrition side, it's like, hey, do you think we could get you with someone that might be able to give you some more strategies from a mental performance standpoint that maybe I can't give you as a dietitian? So I do feel like those third party, you're trained people, psychologists and sports psychologists or mental performance coaches, they're trained in that space. But I would think that there could be some value significantly and just helping the family dynamic as well, right? I mean, obviously, if everyone's down in the family or whatever that is, we want to make sure that that kid is getting help. Do you sometimes work with parents and athletes together in those types of situations, or do you often separate them? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so very rarely do we do sort of a joint session,
Hmm.
but sometimes it might become necessary to answer a specific question or that type of
Yeah.
thing. But I always work with the athlete as the primary client
Hmm.
or the parent as the primary
Okay.
client. And that's kind of what happens. And if the athlete is the primary client, I'll always have consulting with the parent built into that.
Got it. Got it. I think that's helpful because for lots of parents are like, what does that even look like? You know what I mean? What does that look like to have my child or my young athlete see any type of, sports performance, mental performance, sports psychologist person? So very, very helpful. And I know just like in general, back to my word resilience that we've been talking about, a lot of this resilience is built just into the daily habits of life and how you're building those daily habits. So when we're talking to both athletes, and then also to parents, what are a few small, very actionable steps that families can take to help strengthen their mental game? We've talked about a few of these, but do you have any other just real specific strategies that maybe parents and athletes can spin off of or that they can both do together?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind that we haven't talked about so far is called the daily wins exercise.
Ah,
And this is super powerful because, oftentimes as human beings, our nature is to go to the negative, like
yes,
what didn't go
100%.
well? What should have we done? That was terrible. But if we intentionally at the end of each day or the end of each practice, either one can work, really sit down and think about 3 to 5 things that did go well,
Okay.
because we could always pull those out, no matter
Hmm.
how catastrophically we're looking at the situation or
Yeah.
and by doing that consistently over time, we're kind of shifting our lens, hopefully, well, definitely to neutral, but maybe even to a little bit of the positive domain, right? So
Yeah.
that we're a little bit more balanced in our outlook so that we can pick out those positive things more readily over time. So
Love
that's a
that.
very powerful one that, athletes can do on their own. I always recommend that parents do it as well, but they
Hmm.
can do it together. You can talk
Yeah.
about it, and that's a very good one.
Do you ever recommend, obviously, you can like talk about it. I think of like a dinner table, like talking about it at night. Do you ever recommend tracking, like tracking those daily wins so that on hard days, they can reference back to those? Or is it more just like in a discussion standpoint?
Oh, no, 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 100% tracking. So,
Track it. Got it. Okay.
jotting everything down so that we then have
Hmm.
that record to refer back to when, yeah, we're feeling
Yeah.
particularly low or in a hole or what have you. It's absolutely imperative to track.
I think that's so important because a lot of, resilience and mental game things, just like in nutrition, we made people look at what is your meal plan? Are you following that? So you can go back and see, like, hey, what went right or what went wrong? Or if something went terribly wrong, we're like, whoa, what did you do before? What led us to that point? And I'm sure that from the mental performance side, that stands so true as well because then they can look back like what was good, what was bad. And on the day sometimes where things are hard, no matter who you are, I think remembering like what is going good can kind of like to your point get you at least back to neutral, if not to
Right.
positive.
Precisely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Love that. Okay, so as we close out, if you were going to give one message potentially like from your book that to both parents and then also maybe to athletes, what would you say that is like in regards to building resilience, being present, being all in yet not too much? What would you say that one thing is that you would encourage parents and or athletes to do?
Yeah, so that thing is really focusing on the possibility on the
Yeah,
other side
like
of the
that.
challenge, whatever
Hmm.
that looks like. Yeah,
I
focusing on the
love that.
possibility. And for parents specifically, focusing on the possibility for their child,
Yeah.
not only themselves.
I love that because so many times you get so stuck in what's going on right now or like, reliving the negative thing that happened back to my dad and spilled milk. So I love that focusing on the possibility because that could be related to injury, that could be related to loss that could be related to not making a team, lots of different things. I mean, I love this because I love the practical side of everything that you've talked about. You've really given parents some good tips, some good strategies. Parents, I would encourage you, just like I would with anything that I always tell people to do in nutrition. Pick one of them and start working on it. You may not be able to change everything overnight. And Dr. Lund, I don't know if you have thoughts there, but maybe pick one strategy and start working on it and then build upon it. Is that a fair thing to recommend?
I love that. That's a great thing to recommend because we can't do everything at once.
Oh,
And we need to be able to see small changes over time. And that starts with picking one thing.
all right. So tell us where people can find more. So let's hear where we can find your book, where we can find your podcast and where we can just find anything about you. Tell it to us, and then we will also drop that in the show notes because I want parents to go find your book, Step Away, the key to resilient parenting.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, my website is www.katelundspeaks.com.
Okay.
And there's information on the book there. It's available there, but also available on Amazon. So I would suggest that. Very easy to pick it up on Amazon.
Yep.
And I'm very active on LinkedIn as well as Instagram. So those, I think, are
Perfect.
the primary ways to get in touch with me.
Perfect. And what about your podcast?
Oh, right. Yes. The Optimized Mind is available, able to be listened to wherever we
And
can listen
any
to
other
podcasts,
places? Okay.
Apple, Spotify, all of them.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, for your expertise. Like, this is just such an important topic. I've done this for 20 years and talked to a lot of parents along the way. And I think parents always really have the best intentions in mind, but sometimes it's challenging to know how to deal with their own selves in these spaces. So, thank you so much for your time. And then just really for all your expertise in regards to helping both athletes and parents.
100%. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.